Dawn's crimson light filtered through the dusty air as harsh winds carried the bitter taste of drought across the barren landscape. Elias Ward pulled his horse's reins tighter, steel-blue eyes scanning the horizon through weathered crow's feet, until his grandfather's forgotten homestead appeared ahead, empty for countless seasons. The lending house had seized his ranch. His livestock had been sold off. All that remained of his family's legacy had disappeared into the wind, all except this weathered structure where he'd spent his childhood summers running wild and free. He'd anticipated finding dust-covered planks and weeds choking the entrance. Instead, what greeted Elias was a horror so brutal it made his blood run cold. 6 Native American women dangled motionless from the timber fence, their torn garments flapping like broken wings in the bitter breeze. Bare toes hung lifeless in the morning chill. Matted hair concealed faces marked by violence, with crude rope burns seared into makeshift wooden signs hammered against their bodies reading, "Morrison's Territory." His stallion bucked wildly, whinnying in fear as it retreated. From the overwhelming stench, Elias ground his teeth together. Throughout this region, from tavern gossip to the stagecoach depot beyond the settlement, folks whispered identical warnings. Challenge Morrison, and you'll settle the debt with your life. Now the evidence swayed before his boyhood sanctuary. But then Elias noticed it, a slight tremor in one woman's fingertip, a barely perceptible gasp, weak as dying embers. Several still clung to life. He leapt from his mount, boots striking the frozen earth with determination. His weathered, work-worn hands shook as they reached toward the noose. Elias understood precisely what consequences severing that rope would bring. Morrison wouldn't overlook this transgression. Now, if faced with this choice, would you risk everything to rescue these women? Share your thoughts below. The steel in Elias's grip gleamed as he sliced through the hemp. The unconscious form collapsed and he lunged forward to break her fall. Her body felt weightless, frigid as something rescued from a tomb. Yet a weak heartbeat still pulsed beneath her throat. He positioned her carefully on the ground before moving swiftly to the remaining victims. Each rope fell in turn. 6 battered souls now stretched across the dirt before the cabin entrance. Their breathing remained shallow, desperately grasping at each moment. Elias carried every woman onto the covered porch. The heavy door groaned open to reveal his grandfather's abandoned dwelling. Thick with accumulated grime, spider webs stretching between every beam. Only bare walls and the odor of decay lingered. Yet in this instant, it transformed into a refuge for 6 spirits hovering between worlds. Elias struck a match. The tiny flame wavered initially before casting gentle illumination across exhausted features. These weren't anonymous victims. Each possessed her own history, her unique inner fire. The first, Nara, possessed flowing ebony hair and piercing eyes that, despite heavy lids from exhaustion, still blazed like burning coals. A vicious gash marked her face, proof of survived cruelty. Beside her rested Ayen, the most fragile, pressing delicate hands to her chest. Though each breath brought visible pain, her wide gaze retained that spark, delicate yet unbroken. Then came Tala, impressive in stature with powerful shoulders. She'd obviously endured the worst punishment, yet commanded respect through her bearing, an unmovable foundation refusing to crumble. Ween leaned against the timber wall, her expression peaceful and profound. Her composure revealed natural leadership and wisdom, even as her frame trembled. Ayoka, the eldest among them, wore silver-streaked hair while tending to others, arranging fabric and gently clearing blood-matted strands from Ian's brow. In the dancing firelight, she resembled a guardian protecting her family. Finally, Kiona, auburn-haired with sapphire eyes. Despite cracked lips and blood at her mouth's corners, a defiant half-smile played across her features, challenging death itself. Elias positioned himself opposite them in contemplative silence, watching faces illuminated by flickering light. His grandfather's words echoed from memory. Property isn't claimed through currency alone, Elias. You defend it with sacrifice. Now this cabin had evolved beyond merely sheltering a defeated man. It had become a bunker, and these 6 Apache, Women, though wounded and weakened, remained flames refusing extinction. Elias realized that by rescuing them, he'd committed himself to a path offering no retreat. The fire crackled quietly, smoke spiraling through gaps in the deteriorated ceiling. The 6 women huddled together, their breathing growing more regular, yet their eyes still gleamed with determination in the shadows. Elias offered water from his flask to each in succession. They drank as if consuming life itself, parched lips trembling, unsteady hands grasping desperately. Nara's voice first shattered the stillness. Her throat displayed angry red marks from the noose, but her words came sharp and unwavering. "Don't abandon us here." Elias met her stare. This wasn't merely a request. It was a command born from the will to endure. He nodded slightly, pressing the container into her palms before continuing to the next. Kiona, the flame-haired warrior, released a gravelly chuckle. "You realize Morrison claimed this territory right after your grandfather's passing? Every soul who's dared trespass since has faced consequences. And here you stand," Elias replied quietly. He clenched his fists, pewter eyes fixed on the dancing flames. A voice in his mind whispered, "Flee now, and you might survive." But what? Meaning would such existence hold, witnessing others perish while remaining idle? Ween, the contemplative one whose gaze held ancient depths, reached beneath her tattered shirt and retrieved a bundle of blood-stained documents. She placed them gently on the wooden floor, her voice softer than wind through door cracks. "These contain what he can't dispute. Morrison's correspondence to his gang, instructions to authorities, sheriff's bribes, everything. He believed murdering us would bury the truth. But these survived." Elias leaned closer. The penmanship was rough, the signature sloppy, ink blotched, yet the stench of corruption and murder permeated every line. His hands trembled as thunder pounded in his chest. Ayoka, the matriarch, carefully wrapped a threadbare blanket around Ian's petite shoulders before turning to Elias, her tone calm yet unshakable. "You severed those bonds. You're no longer an outsider." In that instant, Elias comprehended that destiny had sealed itself. He hadn't returned to his grandfather's homestead merely seeking shelter after losing everything. He'd arrived to take his position in a conflict written generations ago. These 6 Apache women were no longer strangers. They were living testimony. Flames that refused to die, and with one swing of his blade, Elias had intertwined his fate with theirs. Beyond the walls, wind howled through the canyon, carrying ghostly wails, a warning drifting on the air. Within the cabin, fire burned bright in the eyes of Elias and the 6 Apache women. A crucial meeting had concluded, and tempest clouds gathered on the distant peaks. That evening stretched endlessly. Wind whispered through board gaps like countless phantom voices. Elias sat beside the entrance, Winchester balanced across his knees, attention focused on the fire. Behind him, the 6 Apache women rested near the hearth, their labored breathing gradually steadying. Eventually, Nara stirred. She raised herself up, obsidian eyes meeting Elias's. "Do you understand what you've accomplished?" Her voice carried strength despite its softness. Elias remained silent as she continued. "By cutting those ropes, you challenged Morrison. He may seek your blood." Elias slowly lifted his gaze. Firelight danced in his steel-gray eyes, cold as tempered metal. "I've already sacrificed everything. If my life follows, then so be it, provided I perish knowing I didn't desert those who needed me." The statement settled over the cabin like massive stone, yet also like the first strike of a pickaxe breaking new earth. Ayoka, silver hair cascading over her shoulders, smiled faintly while binding Ian's wounds. She whispered, "A man who places righteousness above his own existence is extraordinary." Tala, the broad-shouldered woman, released a low, coarse laugh. "Perhaps you're not as weak as you appear. Maybe you can bear all our burdens." Elias offered no response, simply handing her a worn dagger, its blade dulled by age. "When that moment arrives, use this before I fall." In that instant, firelight played across their weathered faces. No one spoke further, but all understood. An invisible cord now bound them together, not Morrison's rope, but destiny's thread. By sunrise, wild bird calls echoed from the ridges. Elias rose and stepped onto the porch. The sky was turning ash-colored, mist blanketing the canyon. On the Abi fence post, dried blood still marked where the 6 women had hung, now glowing faintly crimson beneath the early haze. Elias gripped his rifle strap. Pride stirred in his chest, weighty yet righteous. Inside the old cabin, 6 pairs of eyes observed the silhouette of the man standing in the gray dawn. Once a stranger, Elias was transforming into something greater, a foundation, a survivor. And the women, once broken, were becoming allies prepared to stand with him. I'm deeply thankful for your presence here. If this tale stirred memories of crimson sunset evenings and hoofbeats echoing in your soul, please subscribe to my channel so we can gather again tomorrow. And I'll share another story from the untamed frontier. Dense morning mist shrouded the canyon. The world beyond seemed consumed by white vapor. Elias occupied the porch steps, steaming coffee mug in hand, Winchester resting against the adjacent wall. From within the cabin came soft, coughing, shuffling footsteps, then quiet again. The 6 Apache women remained weak, but the fire in their spirits burned more intensely than the previous night. Elias knew this tranquility wouldn't endure. Stillness always preceded the tempest, and predictably, his mule reared up, releasing a loud, troubled whinny. Its ears turned toward the dusty crimson path. Elias set down his cup, steel-gray eyes narrowing. Then came the distant rumbling. Initially, hoofbeats rolling through fog, sparse at first, then intensifying, accelerating, multiplying. A force approached. Inside the cabin, Nara rose quickly, her black eyes becoming sharp as ice. He's aware. Morrison knows we survived. Kiona clenched her jaw until her lip bled from the tension. Our options are limited. We can perish in this cabin or transform it into his tomb. Elias entered, his gaze sweeping each of them. No grand speeches, no ritual. He opened his grandfather's ancient chest, revealing several worn rifles, scattered ammunition, a hunting blade, and an old Apache bow from wartime. He distributed them systematically. Ruby accepted the Colt, hands shaking, but eyes fierce. Tala secured the knife in her belt, gripping the handle as if ready to shatter bone. Ween claimed the bow, drawing the string taut. It released a sharp, tense sound like fate about to snap. Ayoka quietly loaded a battered musket, her expression grave as a mother protecting her children. Ayan trembled, but Elias gently placed a small blade in her palm, whispering, "Don't fear. Hold on to it." In that moment, the old cabin became a fortress. Every wooden beam, every window crack transformed into a firing position. The hearth fire flared, illuminating 7 faces ready to confront a pack of wolves. Outside, hoofbeats grew closer, shaking the earth. Then torches appeared through the mist, lighting twisted, savage faces. Laughter and shouts echoed like death's anthem. Morrison hadn't arrived with mere thugs. He'd brought an army, heavily armed, encircling the cabin on 3 sides. Elias drew a deep breath, his voice rough but steady. This is no longer an abandoned home. This is our stronghold. If we fall as free people. Their eyes met, fierce and wordless. 7 hearts beat in rhythm with the pounding hooves outside, every second stretched tight as wire. The cabin door shuddered under pressure. The storm had arrived. Thundering hooves shook the ground. Over 24 of Morrison's riders surrounded the cabin, torches blazing, casting flickering light over brutal faces. Morrison sat tall atop a black stallion, his long coat billowing in the wind, eyes gleaming with the arrogance of a man who believed he commanded the law. "Ward!" His voice rang out like a judge delivering verdict. "Surrender them. This cabin isn't yours. You cut them down last night. What, you seeking death?" Elias stood firm on the porch, Winchester ready, his voice rough but solid as granite. "This cabin belonged to my grandfather. His blood still soaks these boards. If you want it, Morrison, you'll have to climb over my corpse." Mocking laughter erupted, then a gunshot tore through the air. The bullet slammed into the wooden post inches from Elias's skull. The battle had commenced. Gunfire roared. The cabin shook under the assault. Glass shattered. Wood splinters flew. Ruby shrieked and fired, dropping a man scrambling onto the porch. Tala bellowed, cutting down another as he burst through the door. Ian trembled, but when a shadow lunged at her, she drove her blade into his arm, enough for Elias to spin and shoot the man down. Ween crouched in shadows, silent and steady. Her bow creaked, then snapped. The arrow struck a man square in the chest. He collapsed without sound. Ayoka, despite her years, calmly loaded the old musket. She fired. The blast echoed like thunder. A rider tumbled from his horse, crashing to earth. Morrison cracked his whip, shouting for his men to advance. Torches hurled onto the cabin's roof. Smoke curled thick into the sky. The entire structure groaned as if preparing to become a bonfire. Elias hit the floor, reloading round after round. Each shot found its target, but a bullet grazed his shoulder. Hot blood soaked his shirt. Kiona rushed over, fired twice with her Colt, then pulled Elias to his feet. Her eyes blazed, red hair wild in the firelight like flame itself. Screams, horses shrieking, gunfire like war drums. The tiny cabin was now the eye of a storm made of blood and flame. Though each fought like starving wolves, they were exhausting. Ammunition dwindled. The wooden walls were riddled with holes. Smoke choked the air. Morrison rode closer, his voice booming through the chaos. "You're nothing but insects. Your deaths will remind this land who holds dominion." Elias dropped to his knees on the porch, clutching his Winchester, 3 bullets remaining. Sweat and blood streamed down his face. His vision blurred, but his spirit held firm. Inside the cabin, 6 pairs of eyes locked onto him. Not one flinched. Smoke poured in. Fire licked the roof. In that moment, it felt as if the entire world held its breath, waiting to see if death would consume them all. The cabin blazed like a beacon in the darkness. Ammunition nearly exhausted. Smoke suffocating every breath. Elias and the 6 Apache women huddled together, each gasp labored, each heartbeat potentially final. Morrison circled on horseback, his cold laughter echoing through smoke and flame. "You think you can oppose me?" he roared. "After tonight, no one in this territory will dare challenge me again." Elias pushed off the floor, attempting to rise. Blood clouded his vision, but his gaze remained sharp as steel. He raised his Winchester, pulled the trigger. Boom! One man fell backward off his horse, but that was merely one among dozens tightening the noose. Then, just as despair took hold, the sound of a war horn pierced the night. It rang across the hills like thunder. Moments later, the ground trembled with pounding hooves. From the valley's edge, hundreds of Apache riders appeared, feathers dancing in their hair, spears and bows raised high. Their battle cries echoed through the mountains, shaking the heavens. The cavalry stormed down the slope like a tsunami. Flaming arrows flew, striking Morrison's ranks. His men screamed, falling, breaking formation, scattering. Through fire and smoke, the Apache surged forward like a flood. Nara leaped to her feet, voice cracking with emotion. "Our people! The tribe has arrived!" Kiona shouted and fired her last Colt round, laughing with smoke-blackened joy. Tala lunged, driving her knife into a retreating soldier. Ween, hidden in shadow, loosed her final arrow. It struck square between a fleeing traitor's shoulders. Morrison's face went pale. He pulled his horse back, screaming, "Hold the line! Don't let these savages destroy you!" But his men were broken. The Apache roared louder. Spears flashed in the firelight. Horses screamed. Men fell. The entire valley became a battlefield bathed in crimson. A massive Apache warrior galloped to the cabin and leaped down, his eyes burning bright, voice rolling like thunder. "Ward, you saved daughters of our people. You are a hero to us." Elias stood tall, blood dripping from his wound, but stance unshaken. He gave a firm nod, gripping his Winchester tighter. In the thunder of hooves and cries of war, he understood. This was no longer just his fight. Morrison was thrown from his horse, bound tight in the Apache circle. His face twisted in hatred, but his eyes showed fear. For the first time, the name Morrison trembled before true justice. The cabin still burned, But in that glow, Elias and the 6 Apache women stood side by side, backs to one another, watching as the storm turned in their favor. The darkness had been torn open, and through it, the first light of dawn broke over the mountains. The battle concluded as the sun crested the peaks. Morning light poured into the valley, shining through black smoke rising from the cabin's scorched roof. Morrison knelt in the center of the Apache circle, hands bound behind his back, face smudged with soot. His eyes remained wide, but the arrogant gleam had vanished, replaced by torn, hollow despair. Ween stepped forward, bundle of wrinkled letters in hand, once hidden beneath her shirt rags. She tossed them at Morrison's feet. Smudged ink and jagged lines exposed his crimes. Bribes to officials, orders to hang 6 innocent Apache women, payments to the sheriff. Morrison screamed, his voice cracked and desperate. "They're forged! Burn them! Don't believe those filthy—" Scraps. But no one listened anymore. Nara stepped forward, retrieving one letter, her voice ringing out like a verdict. "This is your signature, Morrison. You wrote death sentences for innocent people with your own hand. Today, justice has written yours." Elias stood near the porch of the half-burned cabin, blood still seeping from his shoulder, steel-gray eyes cold and clear. He said nothing, simply watched as Morrison was dragged away, his angry screams fading beneath retreating hooves. The Apache chief approached, placing a firm hand on Elias's shoulder, his voice deep and steady like the mountain itself. "You saved, daughters of our tribe. From this day forward, you are our brother. Anyone who dares harm you declares war on all of us." Elias bowed his head, calloused hand gripping the Winchester tighter. He'd never expected that through loss and ruin, he would discover a new family. People who had stood beside him through fire and fury. 3 days later, the cabin was rebuilt. Scorched wood replaced with fresh planks. Elias and the 6 women. Hammered boards, raising the gate where death once hung. Every nail drove out the past. Every strike carved new hope. Ian planted seeds in soil outside the porch. Tala led horses to graze. Kiona, still wearing her fierce smirk, practiced her aim 1 bullet at a time. Ayoka kept the food ledgers with quiet focus. Ween silently transcribed letters into clean copies for testimony. And Nara, her dark eyes burning bright, stood beside Elias every time sunset fell over the valley. One night around the fire, Elias looked around, his voice low and rough like old timber cracking in heat. "I thought I inherited just an old cabin. But what I truly inherited was a family." No one replied. Only Nara rested her hand gently over his, her eyes shining in the firelight. Outside, the silver moon hung over the cabin, no longer a symbol of death, but a fortress of justice and hope. Out here in the West, land could change hands, laws could be twisted, but justice belonged to those who stood together until the end. My dear friends, weapons may break, but courage never runs dry. I believe the most precious thing we inherit is not property, but the choice to stand tall for what is right, even when the storm comes. I hope you all live happy, joyful lives. I love every one of you, my cherished audience. Let me know how you felt about this story in the comments. Type A if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping tales from the Wild West.